What's going on, guys? Welcome to Reporting from the Kingdom, your number one source for all Chiefs info and news. I'm your host, Bob, joined once again with my friend Charles. He's back for this episode, and we've got some big stuff to talk about today. Some big moves with the L'Jarius Sneed trade, big free agency signings across the league. We've even got some rule changes, and it's time to look forward to the draft. So, if you like this episode, I'd greatly appreciate a like, a sub, wherever you're watching this on. And by the way, I want to mention we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube at the moment. Those are the three places you can find this podcast. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So first off, starting off with the good news of the offseason that we've heard so far. The Chiefs have signed Hollywood Brown to a 1-year, $7 million deal worth up to $11 million. He's been a pretty good player so far. He's had some inconsistencies with injuries or maybe quarterback play with Kyler Murray getting hurt recently, but he's shown a lot of potential, and I really think he'd be a great wide receiver one and add a much needed skill set to this offense that we've lacked since the departure of Hill. He's really kind of someone I've been wanting for quite some time since our receiving core struggled this year. He's someone I'd had my eyes on. I honestly figured he'd be more expensive. I figured he'd be kind of in that $14 million range. So I'm shocked we got him at that 7 worth up to $11 million range. And what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's always good to add veteran talent to the team. It increasingly looks like the Chiefs are probably going to look for wide receivers in the draft. So to be able to have another wide receiver that's played for other teams is great. And getting him at that cheap price range, well, I mean, $7 million isn't cheap, but you know what I mean. Cheap for the market is great for the cap. And it's an all-around win for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and really we've struggled a lot with that deep ball recently. MVS was not who we were hoping he would be. Hollywood is a great deep ball player. I know people have talked about how, he has drop issues, whatever. He has like a 3% career drop rate. He doesn't have a drop issue. He had some drops one year and people way overreacted to it. He's not some Kadarius Toney again. It's not a repeat of that, where he's going to drop the ball every single play. No. He is a consistent player. I think he probably hits that $11 million in the incentives and really adds a great skill set to this offense to complement Rashee Rice and whoever else we add to the team. And then we've got some other another smaller signing with Irv Smith Jr. He's third string tight end, probably hasn't done a ton throughout his career so far, but I mean, he has some athleticism, I guess. He has some potential. He hasn't really shown much, but he could be an interesting depth signing if he makes the team. Something to look at least, I guess. And then we've brought back some guys on the D-line, Naughty, some other guys like that, Turk Wharton. We haven't made a ton of big signings. We've really just sat back, waited. We've got Hollywood, of course, which is the big signing I wanted us to make. But looking at his pay grade, it's not a huge signing. But that was kind of my number one player that if we got him, I would have been ecstatic if you're not looking at just guys who were re-signing. And then we've got some worse news with the L'Jarius Sneed trade. Some sad news. I wanted him to be a Chief for life. I felt like as time went on, it became more and more apparent that he wasn't going to be a Chief. I think especially after we paid Chris Jones and gave him the franchise tag, it became pretty apparent that he was going to be traded. I still had hope he would be on the team and they could potentially either play him on the tag or work out a long-term deal. But I certainly get why they traded him. And it's personally, from my opinion, it's sad to see him go. He's one of my favorite players. I love everything he's done for us. And two, he's just seemed like a great guy. And I'm wishing him nothing but the utmost success in Tennessee. I hope the only game he loses next year is the AFC Championship to us. But, he went out. He hasn't been paid much being that late round pick. He went out and he got his bag, which I am, I'm happy. I'm really happy for him. I don't blame him at all. All I wish is that we would have got a little bit more compensation. What are you kind of thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a it's an interesting trade. I feel like the Chiefs should have made more of an attempt to hang on to him, especially with the salary cap, with the room in budget expanding so much this year from 2023. I feel like they probably could have kept Snead, and I think they probably should have at least. I think they should have made more of an attempt to get Snead. And the trade itself, I don't love the 2025 third round, and this year
The pick swap,
Tennessee's
yeah.
what, seventh round?
Yeah, it was a trade up in the seventh, basically.
Yeah, I don't love it. I feel like they could have got something else because Snead is a great player, and I think he's worth more than just a trade up in the seventh and a third. I think that they probably could have got. If I were the Chiefs, I would have wanted a second round in 2025 or another bonus, maybe sixth round or fifth round pick this season. I feel like they could have got more out of the deal than they did, but it's still freeing up cap space for hopefully future wide receivers and defensive players that can fill the void. And we still have Chris Jones, so it's not the end of things, but it is a hard loss for the Chiefs. And of course, I wish Snead well with the Titans.
I am going to have to kind of disagree with you here. Of course, I would have loved more compensation, but a player's only worth what people are willing to give up to get him. And it became apparent that no team was giving up a second round pick or a third this year to pay someone $80 million per year, $55 million guaranteed. And I would have liked more, but a player's only worth what everyone else says he's worth. And in the situation of you think you could have re-signed him, you could have. I think you probably could have re-signed him, but you're looking next year. You've got a great center to re-sign, a great guard to re-sign, a good linebacker to re-sign, a kicker to re-sign. You've got a ton of players to re-sign, and you've already got All-Pro Trent McDuffie and two other corners who have shown a lot of potential with Watson and Williams. I think they can be really good next year with an improved kind of bigger role. So, well, yeah, it sucks to see him go. I think moving on from him was the right decision. I do wish we would have got more, but if you take into account the whole paying him $80 million and the kind of almost chronic seeming knee injuries he's had throughout his career, I can see why they didn't get as much as they maybe wanted to get. But I do see where you're coming from with the wanting more compensation. I certainly wish that we would have got more, like a third this year and like a fifth next or something. But once again, yeah, you're kind of only worth what someone else is willing to give up to get you.
Yeah, you know what? That's all true. You're right. That's all true.
Yeah, and then I do certainly I am gonna miss what he brought to this defense, because he brought such a great aspect where you can put him on Tyreek Hill, you can put him on Stephon Diggs, you can put him on Justin Jefferson, and he'll hold them to 3 catches for 27 yards, something like that. I'm gonna miss that, but I think we've got the guys who can fill the spot. I think we've got the guys who can take that role and do something great. And if you're even just looking at how Veach has done with corners before and how that coaching staff, Spags and Dave Merritt, what they've done with corners, I think we could see another great Kansas City Chiefs corner pretty soon. It was Charvarius Ward the first time. I think they traded or signed him, I can't quite remember, but they didn't give up very much for him. He ended up being great for him in Kansas City, and then they let him walk and replaced him with All-Pro Trent McDuffie the next year. And then L'Jarius Sneed with a really breakout year this year. He'd obviously looked good before, but this was the year he really kind of went to that level that I'd call elite. He went to that elite corner play. So yeah, it is sad to see him go, but I'm glad we didn't just say, well, he's gone. Hopefully we might get a third round comp pick if we're lucky. So Yeah, I would have loved to see him stay, and I would have loved to get more out of him. But ultimately, I think it was the right decision by Veach, and I think it's going to prove to be pretty valuable. And kind of with how valuable, of course, he's very valuable to this team, but this is a really good defense, and with 20 million more dollars, you can make that defense even better. Let's say you get another good pass rusher or another good corner to replace him even. You can spend that money to make that defense really good. A great pass rush can take away a great receiver. A great corner can only take away one receiver at a time. A great defensive lineman can take away an entire offense. He can take away an entire offense at one play with quick pressure. So I certainly agree and know how important having quality corners are. Trust me, with especially with how many elite receivers there are. But a great D line is still one of the most important things, as we've seen with how Chris Jones has won us so many games and helped win us so many big
Hmm.
games, even. And then
Yeah.
if you can spend that money to get even more D linemen, like let's say if they wanted to bring back Emmanuel Ogba or something, or get another quality corner to replace Snead, as I've said before, I think that could work.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and you're completely right. And it does when you look at it that way, the loss of Snead does not affect the team as much. And you know, it's not the end of the world right now. We still are one of the most like we're still the Chiefs. We still have Mahomes. We still have Kelsey. We still have weapons that no one can take away. It's more just polishing up around the edges, the defense, and
Yeah, and I think
that in wide receiver.
yeah, and really I think if you can add another good receiver, maybe a good running back too, you can have a really nasty offense again that can put up numbers like that offense from a couple of years ago when we beat the Eagles, or that offense back in 2019 or back in 2018, sorry, when we lost the Patriots in an overtime heartbreaker. Horrible game that was.
Hmm.
But if you can add some extra weapons to that offense with $20 million, really allows you to do that. There's some guys like OBJ out there who I've seen some buzz around potentially coming to Kansas City, which I would love him on a cheaper prove it incentive based deal. I don't know if he'll take that, but if he would, I would love him on 1 year 6 million, kind of like Hollywood's deal, because OBJ isn't a huge, big playmaker anymore, but he's a consistent veteran who could, I think, teach a young receiving core a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely true.
And then there are a couple Chiefs who have sadly left the team. We've got Tommy Townsend heading to the Texans, another great team, heading down to Houston. Wishing him the best there. I would have loved to keep him, but I think just with the money for the punter market isn't really our market quite so much, spending big dollars on someone who won't get used a whole lot the entire season. And then Willie Gay, kind of the big loss for us this year. I'd say probably the biggest, other than Snead, the biggest loss to an actual free agency. Signed with New Orleans on a 5 year deal, or $5 million 1 year deal, which I found surprisingly cheap for how athletic he is and how good he's been. He's made some really good plays. He's kind of been inconsistent at times, but he's made some great plays. He's been a pretty good player. I figured he'd get more money than that, so, but I get why we didn't keep him. And then, Jody Fortson going to Miami, pairing up with another old teammate there in Tyreek, I guess. The guy
Hmm.
I big fan of Jody. But kind of just sadly, he never was able to stay consistently on the field with a lot of injury trouble he's dealt with, and it just didn't work out. So it just kind of, I feel like what might have been a mutual parting of the ways. Jody thinks he can go get a better opportunity elsewhere, and the Chiefs think they can get a more reliable player with that roster spot, maybe something like that. So once again, wishing
Yeah.
the best for all those players. I hope they do great in their new homes. And also, oh no, I forgot Nick Allegretti. Almost forgot about him signing with the Commanders. He finally, this was something I thought might happen. He finally gets himself a starting gig in Washington after winning 2 Super Bowls. And I think he's going to absolutely be great in Washington. I think he deserves to get a starting job with how good he's played when he's had to step up for us. I think he absolutely deserves that starting job that he's going to get there in Washington. So I'm so happy for him going out and getting new opportunities to flourish and shine with a starting role instead of being a backup to guys like Tooney and Trey Smith and the great guards and great interior line that we have. So wishing all the best for him.
Yep. All of those are, you know, it's been a rough off season in a way. But there's still plenty of positives with all the new acquisitions we have made. So multiple ways you can look at how it's going.
And really, well, we haven't really made all that many acquisitions. We've signed like I think Hollywood and Irv Smith are our only outside signings, unless there's someone I'm forgetting about, which there could be. But those are kind of our main outside signings. I guess the punter as well. But those are kind of our main outside signings. But we've got a ton of cap room, eighth most cap in the league, which for the defending Super Bowl champions is incredible. And we've got a lot of draft picks for a position, and the position we need is the strongest position in the class, one of the strongest positions in the class at least, and one of the best receiver classes in years, one of the best ever potentially, if these players work out. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot to be positive about heading into the season. And of course, yeah, that core still remains intact. We've only lost a handful of guys, and we kept the core of Jones, Mahomes, of course, duh. And I think we've got a really good chance to three-peat, especially if we can make some really good moves. And I do know that some Chiefs fans I saw were kind of upset at Veach. They were upset that he hadn't been signing anyone, which I have to admit I wanted to see him sign someone as well. I was getting tired of waiting. I was impatient, but ultimately I don't blame him. He had the Snead deal to work on, and he didn't want to overpay for someone. So I do wish that he would have signed someone. I wish he would have maybe done a little bit more so far, but we've got a lot of cap room. There's a lot of players still left. I mean, Drew Tranquil and Mike Edwards weren't signed until a lot later in free agency. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. It's going to be
Yeah, absolutely.
next year.
Big news coming into today is the NFL's rule change when it comes to kickoffs. It should really change the strategy for kickoffs and really change things up a lot. What they do is, instead of having the receiving team start at one end and kicking team start on one end, everyone starts on the receiving team's end except for the kicker who kicks it, and everyone is just kind of standing around besides the returners. And it's going to probably seem weird, but it's fine. We'll probably get used to it pretty quickly. And it was changed due to the whole fact of high-speed collisions were really becoming an issue during kickoff when you had the receiving teams, tacklers, or receiving teams, blockers, sorry, and the ball. So they changed this because the XFL used it and it worked really well. And I think it'll really change up kickoffs, It will add strategy. So it'll be really interesting to see how this changes the kickoff strategy. It's said that this is going to cause a ton more returns and up it hopefully to 50 or 60% compared to the 20% return rate we had last year. But it remains to be seen. When you look at it, I don't know how it's going to change returns because the teams, tacklers and blockers are just going to be standing at the 40 and 35, just kind of staring at each other. And it makes you wonder if the returners are really going to be able to find holes in there when you have the whole team just lined up instead of running downfield and slowly getting mixed up and opening holes. Instead, they're all just standing right next to each other. So is this really going to I think this will increase return percentage. I don't think it's going to increase. I think it remains to be seen if it's going to end up increasing like a long kick, like 50-yard kick returns or kickoff touchdowns. I don't know if those are going to be as increased as much as some people think they will. And I think it really poses a really interesting situation for special team strategy and all that. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, because what I'm kind of thinking is when you have two returners there, you know, as much as everyone loves to hate on Kadarius Toney, me included, he is incredibly slippery and is a really good kick returner. If you can put, him and another really athletic guy back there, you've got two superhuman athletes that you can do something crazy with at the return game. And I think that's really another way where you can try to get big returns is you've got two people to mess with to try to fake or fool or lateral or something. And I don't know if you'll see KC try it. I don't know if you'll see us try it as much because we don't need big plays on kickoff. That's not where we're relying on getting our big plays. We're kind of going to put that in the hands of the best player to ever touch a football, practically. So I don't know how much you'll see us use all that, but I think that really is going to be interesting for the strategy, and that is where it'll increase returns. When you've got two guys back there who can mix and mingle, kind of, or even just have that extra lead blocker out in front, kind of like normal kickoffs work, or the old kickoffs work. Sorry, but when you can do that, that's really going to be interesting for the type of strategy it brings. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's going to be an increase in kick returns, kick return yards. I think there's going to be an increase in, especially maybe not huge returns, but I think you might see teams starting past the 25 a lot more frequently, especially because of the rate of returns going up. And then you have got another huge rule change, probably the most controversial one. The hip drop tackle has been banned. This is a really confusing rule change for me because everyone got in a big issue. Everyone got really upset about this whole hip drop tackle type thing, and I still don't feel like there's a great definition for what it is. I mean, a lot of the time it just seems like a tackle. It's like, I mean, yeah, people get hurt when two people are running, 20 miles per hour, and one of them hits the other one into the ground. Some injuries are bound to happen, and I'm all for player safety. I'm a huge advocate for player safety, but I think the hip drop tackle is at least really undefined, and it just adds that extra element of referees deciding games. Hip drop is so weirdly defined that can be called at the end of a game, and who the hell knows what that's going to mean. That can be the difference between a field goal and a punt. So I think having something that loosely defined, kind of like what they did with people got upset with the catch because of how weirdly defined that is. I think this is even weirder with this tackle, and I'm personally not a fan. When I'm hopeful that it's not going to take into effect as much as people think. I'm hopeful it's going to be less of a factor than people think, and it's rarely going to be called. That's my hope. But I'm worried it's going to be too ticky-tacky and almost decide too many games from what the ref sees as a hip drop in real time. And that's also just really hard for a ref to see, what was his tackling form in the split second he was ripped to the ground with two guys going 20 miles per hour. I'm personally not a fan of the rule change, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it works out. And then there's also another more minor rule change that if a coach, now it used to be if they got two challenges right, they get a third. Now if they get one of their first two, they will get a third. They will get a third, which I don't really have many emotions about. I think it's good because it gives more chances to get bad reffing fixed. I think
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
yeah, I think they need to make more plays reviewable, personally,
Yeah.
and also something they
Really, I feel all plays need to be reviewable at this point. It's kind of dumb that we've got all these cameras and we still can't freaking decide what pass interference qualifies as.
yeah, and I get it for some
Like,
calls, for some of the ticky tack calls, because like holding, you can call holding on any play on the field, so I do get that. But and if you went down to review every play, there'd be a lot of really slowed down games. Games are already really long with all the commercials. That'd make them even slower. But I certainly think there needs to be a lot better of a review process. Kind of something that I've thought of is I think it'd be good if there was a team in a booth for each game that if they see, oh, I think there was a penalty on this play, and maybe not for holding on the O line or holding, because that's pretty ticky tack. Call it every play. But if there's something they see that they think should be called, or they think the refs make a mistake, then they can pause the game. Then they can fix it like that. Snap. Because really, coaching challenges and they challenge it, or the booth review, and they're looking and the refs are looking in the little box. That is such a show. Oh, it's so exciting. What's going to happen? Is it going to be reversed? Is it going to stay the same? Oh, no one knows. The refs looking at a small screen in a box to determine what happens. It's like, just have people in the booths with access to every camera angle to where they can see exactly what's going to happen, and where they can really figure out exactly, and make the correct call quicker. It doesn't need to be a big show and tell, but it doesn't need to be a big game on, oh, did he get there or not? And another thing that I think they could do to improve reffing is another thing that one of the other football leagues, I can't remember which of the two did it, but the chips in the footballs. I think that's a great idea. I think the NFL, with how much money they have, they can do a lot of stuff with chips to make spots a lot more accurate. So I think it's something they should do, but not up to me. I'm not in there making the decisions. But I think that improved reffing a lot, in my opinion. And with that being said, my little rant about how I would fix everything wrong with the NFL reffing today is over. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. I think we've kind of covered what we want to cover this episode. Hope y'all enjoyed. I appreciate feedback as always. Like or follow or whatever. That's always greatly appreciated as well. Hope y'all enjoyed. See you in the next one. Peace.